What's up, everybody? It's the Red Alert Podcast. Joe Chap along with you solo. Cindy will be back Monday. We will do a podcast Monday because we missed a couple weeks because I was sick and now she's sick. So it's kind of like a revolving door of sickness. So here we go. Um, a lot to get to on the program today, especially, we're going to do a podcast Monday, but we're going to do a quick podcast just right now just to get something out there in the ether. And this is an interesting time for the Detroit Red Wings. It just truly is an interesting time for the Red Wings because when we look about the Red Wings and we talk about the Detroit Red Wings, there's several things that come to mind when we talk about this Detroit Red Wings team. And I come along and I say this because yesterday the Detroit Red Wings played the Vancouver Canucks. And Vancouver is not a good hockey team by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think anybody's going to sit here and tell you that Vancouver is some world beater, and that's just not the case. But the reality of the situation is Vancouver came in here. It was a game that Detroit could have looked ahead. That's my opinion because if you look who they're playing tomorrow in the Montreal Canadiens, which is a pretty big game for the Atlantic in Montreal on Hockey Night in Canada, it's a big game. And they come out and they steamroll the Canucks 5-1. Patrick Kane gets his 500 goal, 2 goals in that game, just an absolute beating. And a lot of people they worry about things they can't control, like the standings. We look at the standings and you're like, oh, the Red Wings are, they played more games than the rest of the teams. They've only played one more game than the Montreal Canadiens, which they'll play tomorrow. They played 3 more games in Tampa Bay. But I want you to look at point percentage. Detroit has a 622 point percentage, which would be like 5th in the East. So that's where I stand right there. So there's a lot to be said about this Detroit Red Wings team. And the way they played last night against the Canucks really opened my eyes, in my opinion. Because there's 2 things that come along with beating the Canucks. We know the Canucks are not a good team. They're really not. But when you look at the stretch that's coming up, you couldn't ill afford a stretch where you started with a loss to the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, you're going to be playing the Canadiens tomorrow, the Hurricanes on Sergei Fedorov's retirement jersey night. You're going to be playing the Bruins on a back-to-back in Boston, and then the San Jose Sharks, which everyone looks at the San Jose Sharks and they go, they're a young team. They could beat you. They're a good team. So I look at this Red Wings team, and there's a couple of things I stand by. And I've said this for a while. I looked at November and December as the biggest barometer of whether I believe in this Detroit Red Wings team. And I say that with all certainty because when I look at this Detroit Red Wings team and I go back to my point about the point percentage, this was the winning percentage November and December. And then you look at the point percentage in November and December, it was really just missing. And you went on a firestorm in January and February, you got nowhere. And in March, you fizzled out. I think this year has been more concrete. I think this year has been more something that you're seeing more things that you can believe in. You can believe in this team, and I think John Gibson, the goaltender, has turned a corner from when he came here. It looked like he was a little bit out of sorts. We have a fantastic article by Sportsnet highlighting Seider, and we've talked about Seider here on the podcast. You look at his statistics, overall offensive rating, defensive rating, net rating plus 11.3. You look at some of the things like goals for X, X goal for all strengths. You got a good group of people there, and God dang, Shane Godspur would be great to have in the Red Wings right now. But Seider has had a great year. And then you look at some of the players like Lucas Raymond, Patrick Kane, JVR. JVR, I think a lot of people underestimated what he was able to do and what he would be able to do coming in for this team. And he's done a damn good job with the Detroit Red Wings. And I've been very, very pleased with the way that JVR has played this year with the Detroit Red Wings because I did not expect him to be as good as he's been in all certainty. Like I look at JVR and I'm like, all right, he's all right. But, when they signed him, but now I'm like, this guy has been absolutely fantastic for this team. And it's someone that you could really bank on. And I like the way that he's been playing. But JVR has got, when you look at the goals Uh, he's got 11 goals. Lucas Raymond's got 13. I don't think Lucas Raymond has hit the apex of what he can be either. So I look at a lot of underperforming players. I look at Marco Casper. Like I thought Marco Casper would have way more than 3 goals and 3 assists. He struggled this year, but I think that if he takes a step up, this team could be really cooking with some peanut oil, in my opinion, because you look at some of the players that are performing better than I thought they would. Like Axel Sandin Pellica, no one thought he was going to be on the roster. I kind of figured he would be on the roster. I didn't think he'd be on the roster to start, but at some point, but he's got 17 points in 45 games, and it's good. It's really good. This team has a lot of talent, and there's a lot of people that have came from nowhere, like Emmett Fenney. No one knew who Emmett Fenney was, except people that they follow the prospect pool. And look no further than down in Grand Rapids. You don't have to go far to see where the trajectory of this team is going to be. You look at Grand Rapids; they're 28-1-1. And one, there's because they count some overtime loss or something like that. But when I look at the Grand Rapids Griffins, this is the statistics that I put on the page, and you might have seen it already. But for the people that are going to be listening to this podcast or the YouTube video, Grand Rapids records 28-1-1. They got 58 points. They just hit 60 points. All 4 goalies for the Grand Rapids Griffins are under 2 goals against. It's unbelievable. Geilander, 1.57 goals against. Kosa, 1.67. Tokarski, 1.92 goals against. And Michael Postavia, who Steve Yzerman signed from the Czech League, if you remember correctly. He signed from the Czech League, Michael Postavia. They're all under 2 goals against. So that's pretty remarkable for the team in Grand Rapids. And then you go, but what about the offense? Well, before Leonard was set down, he was their best scorer, right? Stein, Dries, Gustafsson, Lombardi, and Mazer are point per game players in the AHL. And I think that's something that could really be said about this Detroit Red Wings team is not only are they good at the NHL level, because they are good at the NHL level. They're second in the Atlantic, 56 points right now. And their point percentage is high within the conference. But what you look at is this. Even going down the pike, AHL, there's a lot of good AHL players that are ready to go. And that's where I stand on this team right now. They're playing so good. They're playing so physical. They're doing all the things they need to be done. And it's something that, when the Yzer plan was starting, right? I think all of us said at one point in time, the Yzer plan, it's been a little bit slow. It's been a little bit played out. I think we're starting to see what the Yzer plan is all about. And, for our first couple years, I mean, you see the statistic right here. Last year, this was the record before the first 38 games. But you see that. Like that's a total reversal of what they've been able to accomplish. So my point here is every one of us at one point in time was like, okay, the Red Wings have an issue, and the Yzer plan might be the issue. Now, if you've been following this podcast along, if you've been listening to this podcast at any point, I've pointed out you had the expansion drafts, the 2 expansion drafts that kind of slowed a little bit of progress, especially when you were trying to protect rosters and protect players. That was an issue. But now you're seeing what it could be, what it could really be. And you're seeing it with Seider, and you're seeing it with Raymond. Even Raymond looks a little bit hurt, to be honest. But this team yesterday showed me once and for all. I had an idea of what the Red Wings were. I had an idea of what they were going to become. But yesterday was a game where I looked at it and said, this is a hard line in the sand moment for this team. Playing Vancouver's not a good team. But sometimes when you play these teams that are not good, you get backed into a corner. You get shown up a little bit. Sometimes you don't take them seriously and you kind of get thrown, off track. And then you're down 2-0 and you're trying to play pickup hockey. And I thought yesterday was such a good game from the Detroit Red Wings perspective because they actually took it for certain and they actually took Vancouver as they were an NHL team. And you could say all that doesn't mean much, but it does mean a lot. It means a ton, especially when you're talking about this Detroit Red Wings team and where they're going and how they're going to have to do things in the next couple months. And remember, February is a lost month pretty much. You're not going to be playing hockey in February because of the Olympic break. And I don't know if you've seen the Olympic ice; they had a crater today, so that's not good. But it's so interesting what this team is doing and this critical stretch they got coming. Like I said, Canadians tomorrow, Hurricanes, Bruins, Sharks. They all don't look like world beaters, but these are teams that can beat you. And I thought coming into this stretch, you had to win the Vancouver game. Had to win the Vancouver game. If you can go 2-2 right here, you're in a good spot. So it was a good game by Detroit. And I thought they did a damn good job at just not allowing things to get out of control. So I'm very pleased with where this team is going, to be honest. But you let me know in the comments if what you think. All right, let's go. All right. Here's the second part. I read an article today from Sportsnet. It was a really good article from Mike Monaco. And I'll pull it up for me. I'm going to pull up right now. But it says Detroit has found a unicorn in Moritz Seider. Details how important the young defenseman is to the Surgeon Red Wings and how much more of an addition into this article. So I go click on the article, and it was a very good article. It said it started with here: death taxes and the Detroit Red Wings make the playoffs. Those were the three guarantees in life for a long time. The Wings made the playoffs from 1990 to 2016, a 25-season stretch where only a lockout could stop them. That seemed like a lifetime ago for Wings fans, though, as Detroit has now missed spring hockey for 9 consecutive campaigns. A lengthy rebuild under the watch of Steve Yzerman, dubbed the Yzer Plan, has taken far longer than anyone in the organization hoped. That said, patience may finally be paying off. Detroit is sitting second in the Atlantic, looking poised to finally end its lengthy playoff drought, and Moritz Seider is the backbone of their blue line and is the biggest reason the Wings appear to have turned the corner. It goes on. Seider has been a standout defenseman for some time, but this year he has taken a game to a different level and is starting to get mentioned in the same conversation with the league's elite. The 24-year-old unique blend of skill, size, physicality, and the ability to play in every situation makes him somewhat of a unicorn when it comes to number one defenders. Detroit leans on Seider heavily, the tune of more than 25 minutes a night. That's 6th highest ice time per game in the league and nearly 3 more minutes than Detroit's next highest defender. Those aren't easy minutes either. Seider is playing more than a minute and a half shorthanded and starting his shifts in the defensive zone more than 50% of the time, often playing against the opponent's best competition. The pair of Seider and Edmundson has become one of the best shutdown duos in the game thanks to the dominance in the defensive zone. Heading into Thursday night, and despite starting on the offensive zone together only 32% of the time, the Wings still generated 576 scoring chances at 5-on-5 with Seider and Edmundson on ice, compared to just 482 against. That's a near minus 100 in more than 563 minutes together. Detroit is also plus 72 in shots with Seider and Edmundson on ice and plus 10, minus 10 in the goals. The Wings have a goals for percentage of 60 when they are on the ice together. Seider and Edmundson have delivered all this while being on the ice for the 5th most defensive draws this season. They go on and on about Seider. Seider is not afraid to put his body on the line when he talks about shots. He's had 103 blocks this year. That's 5th in the NHL. And they say, of course, Seider isn't the only part of the Yzer Plan. It's been a slow build that's included drafting Lucas Raymond, Edmundson, Sebastian Cossa, Marco Kasper, Nate Danielson, and Axel Siem Pellikka in the past 6 years, who have all figured out to be a big part of the Red Wings core into the future. And that was about Seider, because he's He's been a huge reason for the success of this team. And I read the article about Sider and what he's been able to do as a player for this Detroit Red Wings team. And it's just interesting because you think about Sider, and if my co-host was here, Cindy, she would tell you she's seen this coming from a mile away. She's seen this coming from a mile away. And Sider is an interesting player because he's a big physical guy and kind of reminds me of like a Victor Hedman type. And he's kind of gelling into that role of being a Victor Hedman type. And with his progression, the Red Wings have gotten a lot better. And I think that's what the Yzer plan really needed was someone from the roster to take a step up. And Moritz Seider has taken that next step up. You look at the goals. He's got 7 goals this year, 24 assists, 31 points. He's a plus 11. You looked at the stat cord. This was a couple weeks ago. Plus 6.9 offensive rating, defensive ratings plus 4, net rating 11.3. I mean, power plays goals for. He has 18. Just unbelievable stats right there, and it just goes to show you like the reason that this success that the Red Wings are having is tied directly to the players that are on the roster. And we came into this year, and there was a big hope that someone would take the next step. It wasn't a very eventful offseason for Detroit, but Yzerman had the opinion, he had the wherewithal to say, look, we have to continue to get production from the players that we've drafted. Seider, Axel Santin-Pellikka, Lucas Raymond, Edvinsson. These guys are going to be a huge, crucial part. You can't build a team through free agency. You can't build a team through trades. You got to draft and develop. That's the way it goes. And it took a little bit of more the time than people wanted to think. A lot of people wanted this to go quicker than most thought. And the reality of the situation is it didn't go as quick as everyone thought, but it's starting to pay off now, and I look at the standings, like I said earlier, they're second in the Atlantic. They're taking care of business. Their points, if you look at their point percentage, which I think is the biggest thing when you talk about, certain teams playing less games like Tampa Bay and all those teams, point percentage matters. Detroit's got the 4th best point percentage in the entire NHL. I mean, in the Eastern Conference. So I look at that and I say that's a huge mark for this Detroit team. They're moving forward in the right direction. Seider has been a huge reason why. And now it's going to be interesting because, this is going to be an interesting time for the Red Wings because this Olympic break is going to break up a little bit of momentum, and they're going to go into late February, early March. Going to have to reinstall it again. But where they are in the standings is a good barometer of where this team is going to be moving forward. And like the article says, it's interesting that Yzerman had a huge point producer during his career, has molded the team around a hard-nosed blue liner and a top defensive pair that appears to be carrying this team to the postseason. If Detroit gets in this season with Seider leading the charge, there's a good chance that it's the start of another long run of playoff hockey that includes the Red Wings. And this is a national opinion. This is a Canadian opinion. Sportsnet's a Canadian property. They do a lot of good hockey coverage. But when I saw this article today, I read it and I said, look, there is nothing that the Detroit Red Wings could have done better than have these guys develop. Edvinsson and Seider, they're playing out of their mind. It's been great to watch these two guys gel into the players that they're becoming, gel into who they're becoming. And this team is going to become something based on those guys. And you look at down the line, Sebastian Cossa could potentially come up at some point. Does he look like he's becoming a pro goaltender? Yes, he does. If you go look at pro goaltenders and the trajectory, it's usually a little slow pace. I know there's a lot of people out there that wanted to bring off for no apparent reason. But when you talk about goalies in the NHL, it takes a little while, man. I mean, Jacob Fowler, I'll give you an example. Jacob Fowler for the Montreal Canadiens. At Boston College, he was one of the best goaltenders in the entire college hockey. He hasn't got up to the pro leagues yet. It's a sign. It's showing you how hard it is to get to the pro league, NHL as a goaltender. It usually takes a couple of years. There's rare occurrences where, you get a guy who's 18, 19, 20, where they're ready. I mean, Spencer Knight was one of those guys who got drafted in from the U.S. National Development Team. They put him on the Panthers. He hasn't really reached his peak until this year. He's been in the NHL a couple of years. So all you got to know is this Detroit Red Wings team is heading in the right direction. Number one. Number two, Seider has been a huge reason for this Red Wings team's success. And like Michael Amadio says in the article, I mean, just the way that this team has been doing things, like, it's just amazing. Ben Sherratt and Edmondson also rank in the top 25 in blocks. And it's very difficult. It says in the article, Detroit makes it very difficult to get both pucks and bodies in the net. Plus, even though he plays a very physical style, Seider hasn't missed a game yet in his career. It just shows that the Yzer plan, in terms of the way it was constructed, about the drafting and developing, is actually working and paying off dividends. And it's going to be interesting to see what Yzerman does moving forward. It's going to be very interesting to see what he does, because that's my next thing. This stretch is a big one for the Red Wings. This stretch for the Detroit Red Wings is a big one. I hit on it before, but I'll say it again. Canadiens, Hurricanes on Sergei Fedorov night, Bruins, Sharks. Those are 4 tough games in a week span. And when you look at this team is moving forward in the best position possible. The best position possible. This is a big stretch for this team, especially when you think about all the rumors that are going around with the Detroit Red Wings involved in potential trades. And I've said it for a couple years now. I don't think Yzerman was going to make a trade just to make a trade. And I don't think he's going to do it. But what I do think Yzerman's going to do is he's going to look at this team right now, the way it stands right now, and he's going to make a decision. And I think the biggest thing that Steve Yzerman could do in the next couple weeks is let it play out a little bit. And then when you get to the Olympic break, what I think Yzerman's going to do in terms of the way he's going to look at this team is he's going to look at this team and go, how do we get better? And there's players that are mentioned in Detroit, like Rasmus Anderson from Calgary. There's other players that could potentially come available that Detroit could go after. But I think that they would build on their defensive core. Maybe get an offensive guy if for the right price. They're not in the position to go out there and give a boatload for a player. Quinn Hughes would have been perfect for this Detroit Red Wings roster, but I'm not giving what it meant to get Quinn Hughes, especially when you could potentially get him 2 years from now in free agency, especially with the way he spoke about being so close to Michigan and all that jazz. You got a good shot. So I think this is an interesting time for the Red Wings. This is a big stretch. You got the Canadiens tomorrow on Hockey Night in Canada. Monday, you got a behemoth of a game, especially with the player that's getting the jersey retirement. And we'll talk about that on the Michigan Sports Central podcast. So subscribe to that. We'll put the link out. But it's going to be very interesting to see what this Detroit Red Wings team can do moving forward. And I think this is a big stretch for them. And if you can be in the top 3 of the Atlantic by the time we get to the Olympic break, I think Steve Yzerman will begin the process to look for reinforcements. We heard what Dylan Larkin said last year I'll play it
You
again.
got to come up with wins, and I think especially in March, it was hard. That we didn't do anything, and then I felt the group kind of we didn't gain any momentum from the trade deadline, and guys were kind of down about it. So it'd be nice to add something and bring a little bit of a spark on the ice, and maybe a morale boost as well.
Larks, how do you feel that you've maybe evolved?
So you heard Dylan Larkin there, and we've heard this clip again and over again and over again and over again. And I'm not playing it to piss people off. I'm playing it because Steve Yzerman's not going to make he's not going to make a 2-time mistake. He's gonna reward the team with what they've been able to do over the course of the season, and he's gonna give them what they need to do to get in the playoffs. When your captain comes out and says it really bummed us out that we didn't trade for reinforcements, part of it is you got to look at Larkin, you got to look at the players on the roster and say you weren't good enough for me to invest capital into this product. But when you look at this product that the Red Wings have right now and where they are in the standings, I think it's imperative, absolutely imperative, that the Detroit Red Wings and Steve Yzerman get what they're supposed to get and do what they need to do to get in the playoffs. I think the playoffs this year is absolutely, number one, a huge stepping stone. And they don't have to win a playoff series. It would be nice if they win a playoff series. But just getting in the playoffs and making a little bit of a noise would be great, because you can go into next year saying we were a playoff team. Free agents are going to take notice because you haven't been in the playoffs in 9 years. So teams there's players that are making financial decisions. They're making long-term future decisions, and they're looking at the Red Wings track record. And if they see what they're seeing this year with the Detroit Red Wings and what Steve Yzerman's been able to put on the ice and everything like that, they're going to sit here and they're going to go, I want to be a part of that. I think something's growing, and let's go do something. So I think the Sportsnet article with Seider showed everything. Where this team is going, what this team is doing, Seider being a big part of it. But I can tell you this right now. It's been Larkin, Seider, DeBrincat, Kane. Those guys have been huge for this team. And I love the way this team is going. And I think there's a big plus up going forward. And I think this Detroit Red Wings team has a very good future. Very good future. And this is a big stretch of the schedule right here. It's a tough stretch. Boston's competing. Every game will be a grind. But if you get a 2-2, you maybe perhaps get 3-1, or for God's sakes, you sweep the whole thing. That would be impressive. That would be super impressive. So that's where I stand. We'll be back Monday for the Red Alert podcast. We'll talk to you guys later on the podcast. Thank you for watching. We'll see you guys in the next one. And if you like the podcast, subscribe to the Red Alert podcast page on YouTube. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next podcast.